My name is Janet Marsh. I'm one of the founders of the Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. The way it all happened was that I had volunteered for an Episcopal Church women's project, which was a study of the high-level nuclear waste dump. My home county, where we are now in the Appalachian Mountains, was selected as one of the possible sites for the nation's commercial nuclear waste. And I thought I was volunteering for a 6-month study project, and 30 years later, here we are with a league of community-based groups, mostly across North Carolina, but also in several other states in the Southeast. The beginning was at the Mission House here in Glendale Springs. About 50 merchants and teachers, homemakers and farmers gathered and decided to create what we were calling then a secular committee. And then we named ourselves Blue Ridge Environmental Defense League. People ask all the time why we haven't changed our name. But actually the board won't change it. They say Blue Ridge sounds so clean. And besides, everybody's used to it now. Our first big fight was that high-level nuclear waste dump. And I, like most of our members, like most of our chapters, was drafted into the environmental movement. I was raising small children and operating a small farm, and what happened was that the Department of Energy was looking at crystalline rock to bury 70,000 metric tons of waste that would be hazardous to all life. That made terrible sense to me, that here we are creating something that is going to be hazardous to all life for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. We had a huge meeting at the county courthouse in Jefferson. 450 people came, but we had the Department of Energy officials here. We had top state officials here, but the most important part of the meeting was that we had a fact sheet that took the technical language of the DOE and translated it into regular English that people could understand. And I think that's still one of the best things that we do. The campaign was victorious. I'm very proud that not only did we stop the waste from coming here to the mountains of North Carolina, but the project was completely ended by 1987. The turning points in the campaign, I think, are two. One of them was that in Asheville, after Lou Zeller's home county of Madison was identified as one of the 12 best sites in the nation, we had a public hearing, turned out enough people for 24 hours of hearing. And we were limited to 5 minutes at a time. And not all of the statements or songs or poems were 5 minutes long. So there was a huge number of people. That said a big no to the federal government. But then we had a conference in Maryville. We invited people from 13 states, the 13 southern states. It was on high-level nuclear waste transportation. We wound up with people from 22 states in the District of Columbia. On the whole day of strategy, we created the Southern Environmental Network, which went on to push the legislation that actually ended the dump and also ended an above-ground storage depot that had been targeted for the Oak Ridge area of Tennessee. So it was a complete rout, a total victory. I learned a lot of lessons in those early years. One of the lessons I learned was that it's not enough just to be right. It's not enough to know the right information or to know key people to share that information with, like government officials and elected leaders. But one has to have strategic action campaigns that do what's unexpected. We've used street theater, we've used civil disobedience many times. We've used the media, I think, to great effect. We've filed legal actions. We've organized in places that where the people had already given up. The variety of things that we've done over the years certainly helped us in fighting the low-level, so-called low-level radioactive waste dump. All of our first campaigns were about waste. And in that fight, it was an 8-state dump that was targeted for 4 different areas of North Carolina ultimately. North Carolina was picked as the dump state. And this was also nuclear power plant waste, medical waste, and other types of just categorized as low-level radioactive waste. Also, some of it dangerous for tens and hundreds of thousands of years. That campaign was so successful in part because the volunteer county of Richmond turned around. The people there were absolutely marvelous to work with, the people of force. An earlier turning point in people's attitudes and knowledge was the takeover of a live television show. The so-called low-level radioactive waste management authority lost its mind and decided to have a meeting on live television on the public television station in which they were going to go from 4 sites down to 2. And they were making that announcement that day. The way we did it was what the press later called a filibuster. Lou Zeller was first, and he stood up very respectfully, announced that he had a proposal for a change in the agenda of the meeting. And he was ultimately carried out. But he got to talk for 6 or 7 minutes. Following him, in about 5 or 6 minutes, was Kay Cameron, a Methodist minister's wife, navy blue suit, white hair, white carnation. And she stood up and filibustered, telling the truth about radioactive waste. And ultimately, 8 of us were pitched in the mud. But the meeting communicated to all the children of North Carolina what the dangers of radioactive waste really are, and what the feelings and opinions and knowledge of the people in the directly affected communities amounted to. And so that was a really, really huge step forward. We have, over the years, stopped close to 30 commercial solid waste megadumps. These megadumps pose a threat to the well-being of the communities because all landfills leak. The Environmental Protection Agency has admitted that all landfills will leak. Continuing to stop these dumps is a high priority for us. In 2007, we stopped 6 huge megadumps with one fell swoop, and part of that happened because David Mickey, our wonderful organizer, working on solid waste issues, kept the counties together. And together, these county leaders, these chapter leaders, met and shared strategies, they shared successes, they shared what hadn't worked, and then they worked together for everyone's benefit. And that, I think, is one of the things that makes our league so important. One of our founders, Bernard Goss, almost insisted on a chapter framework for our league. He said that unless we continue to support, organize and support strong, cohesive community groups, we're going to have to do the same work in the same vulnerable counties over and over. But there have been more advantages to that. Together we are stronger. We learn from one another. The chapters learn from one another. And also we're pretty formidable as a league with 30 years of experience behind us now. And that feels good. It feels good to be strong, and it feels good to have stuck to our founding principles based in earth stewardship and caring for one another.